Before he was the great emancipator, he was just Abraham, a quiet, awkward boy from the frontier who knew pain before he knew power. And when the weight of a fractured nation fell on his shoulders, it almost broke him. He lost his mother at 9, his sister at 19. Death seemed to follow him, shaping his soul, deepening his silence. In 1836, he wrote to a friend, "I am the most miserable man living." It wasn't just politics, it was personal. In 1860, Lincoln became president of a country already falling apart. Within months, 11 states would leave the Union. War loomed. He wasn't popular, he wasn't powerful. Many thought he was the wrong man for the job. But he believed in the Union, and more importantly, in its unfinished promise. He carried himself with an inner strength born from tragedy. He was also carrying something else, a secret burden. Behind closed doors, Lincoln faced an enemy that didn't wear gray. It was grief, self-doubt, sleepless nights, filled with casualty lists and broken letters. He would walk the White House alone at night, whispering to portraits, praying for guidance, and sometimes just silence. On New Year's Day, 1863, Lincoln made the most dangerous decision of all. He would free the slaves, not as a war tactic, but as a moral stand. Months earlier, he told a delegation that had come to ask for emancipation. "My paramount object in this struggle is to preserve the Union. The question of slavery, while of great importance, is not the main effort of the war in its beginning. I should be glad to see its slavery go, but it was not the great object for which we are fighting. But now you tell me that slavery is wrong, and I can say it is wrong, but I cannot strike at it in this way. I want to do it right. I want to do it judiciously." To many, it was a political death sentence. Slavery was an institution in the South. Its abolition would cost Lincoln everything he had ever hoped to achieve, maybe even his life. But when the time was right, he acted with the stroke of a pen. He shattered an institution that had shaped a nation and changed a continent forever. But not everyone saw Lincoln as a hero. At Ford's Theater, April 14, 1865, a bullet took him. But not before he finished the work he believed he was born to do. He saved the Union, freed millions, and carved a legacy into the soul of a nation. But inside, it nearly destroyed him. That's the part we often forget. From his inauguration in 1861 until his death in 1865, President Lincoln carried the nation's heaviest burdens, often in solitude, often in silence, always with honor. For 6 years, he was the bearer of a broken heart. What did he see when he looked in the mirror? What did he feel when he looked out over the crowds? What did he think about when he looked up at the stars? Most of all, what did he feel about himself? How does one bear such a monumental burden, carry such a heavy load, and still walk through the fire of it all with such grace? On February 27, 1864, he confided in a close friend, "If I could do all that is expected of me, I would rather be no man." There are some, indeed, who have so much of the milk of human kindness in them that they would die for those they do not know. They would give their lives for principles they have never lived by. They would shed the last drop of blood for causes they have never bled for. I do not say there is anything wrong in this, but it is not my forte. I cannot put myself to be in debt for others in this way. I do not feel equal to the task. What a strange thing for a man to say who had become synonymous with sacrifice. Who could better embody the concept of paying any price, bearing any burden? The presidency was the ultimate test. He rose to meet every challenge, every crisis, every sorrow, every hope. But how much did it cost him? What did he pay in order to do what he did? What did it cost him to be Lincoln? Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, near Hodgenville, Kentucky. He grew up in a small log cabin in Indiana. His father, Thomas, was a man of contradictions: violent, uneducated, spiritual, devout. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was gentle, loving, fragile, yet strong. She balanced her husband's rough edges with quiet kindness. When Abraham was 9, she died. 3 years later, the family moved again, this time to Illinois, where Abraham, tall for his age, helped clear trees, hunt, fish, and read whatever he could get his hands on. He loved books. He taught himself law. By age 23, he was postmaster of New Salem, Illinois, where he struggled to keep his head above water. As he wrote to a friend, "You would not know me if you were to meet me. The best that can be said of me is that I am uncommonly plain. Plain, yes, Unassuming, yes, but beneath the surface, something was stirring, taking shape. In his spare time, he studied law, then practiced. Within a few years, he was a successful lawyer. At 34, he married Mary Todd, a wealthy widow from Lexington, Kentucky. They had 4 boys. Lincoln was devastated by the loss of 2 sons, but in Mary, he found solace and support. "She is worth the whole world to me," he once wrote. In 1834, he was elected to the Illinois legislature. 5 years later, he was elected to the House of Representatives. He served 1 term, then returned to practicing law. He was drawn back into politics during the Mexican War. When he successfully argued for the return of land taken from Mexican citizens by American military forces, the case made him famous. Suddenly, people across Illinois were talking about him. Newspapers across the North began mentioning him in connection with the presidency. Lincoln had arrived, but he was still far from the White House. He didn't seek higher office. He liked his life as a lawyer. But when his friends talked him into running for the Senate, he won. Now, people outside Illinois were talking about him. National politicians began taking notice. By 1858, he was running for the U.S. Senate against Stephen Douglas, an Illinois Democrat. It was the race of his life. They debated, they campaigned. Lincoln spoke at Cooper Union in New York City. People listened as he laid out his views on slavery, the Dred Scott decision, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. People were electrified. Newspaper accounts spread like wildfire. Some said he was ready for the presidency. Others said he was too radical. Still others said he was a failure. Back in Illinois, he lost the election to Douglas, but his national reputation soared. 4 years later, when the Republican Party nominated him for president, he won. In November 1860, Lincoln wrote to a friend, "I am very busy just now, doing the duties devolving upon me as a candidate for the office of President of the United States. If I am elected, I shall require all your time and all your talents. If not, I shall need no services for a time. At all events, come what may, I shall not be a candidate again." He was referring to his fear that if he were not elected, he might be tempted to run again in 1864. And if he ran again and lost, he would probably never forgive himself. As it turned out, Lincoln was elected, but perhaps he knew it was only a matter of time before he was called to lead his country through its greatest crisis. When he took the oath of office on March 4, 1861, little did he know that in less than 2 months, 11 states would leave the Union. When Confederate troops fired on Fort Sumter on April 1861, Lincoln called for volunteers. In his first inaugural address, he had vowed to preserve the Union. Now he meant to keep that promise. He raised an army, he appointed a cabinet, he met with diplomats, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, he authorized the Gettysburg Address, he walked the halls of the White House, whispering to portraits, praying for guidance, and sometimes just silence. When he learned that General George McClellan had underestimated the enemy at Bull Run, he confided in a friend, "I feel like a fool. Why didn't somebody kick me?" Later, after touring the battlefield, he came across a dead soldier. He bent down, touched the body, stared at the ground. "I cannot tell you what my feelings were," he said afterward, "when I came away." After Antietam, when his secretary told him that some people were calling for his resignation, Lincoln asked, "Why? Because I have lost a battle? Do they know what I have paid for it?" Throughout his presidency, he suffered the agony of defeat and the ecstasy of victory. He grieved the dead. He mourned the widows and orphans. He honored the living. He pushed for Reconstruction. He traveled to Richmond to dedicate a cemetery. He visited the tomb of an unknown soldier. He laid a wreath on the grave of Lincoln's assassin. He met with former Confederates. He welcomed the South back into the Union. In 1865, he was shot. He died the next day. On the morning of his second inauguration, he woke early. He was nervous. He paced his room. Finally, he got dressed, went downstairs, and ate breakfast with his wife and children. He walked to the White House, where his cabinet awaited him. He listened as they discussed the State of the Union. When it was time to leave, he walked to the window and waved to the crowd below. Someone shouted, "We love you, Mr. President." He stopped, turned around, and said, "I love you too." And in that moment, for a brief moment, everything was right with the world.